This is Ask the Governor with Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards. It's your chance to speak with Governor Edwards and ask questions that are important to you. The phone number is 877-217-5757. This is Ask the Governor on the Louisiana Radio Network.
Thank you, Michelle Southern. Your number again is 877-217-5757. I'm Jim Inkster, your moderator. Governor John Bel Edwards is at your service for the next hour, his 19th Ask the Governor show. So he is here to take questions from any comers on a variety of topics, and let's start with a controversy in Caddo Parish. The Sheriff Prater, a popular figure in that area, has gained a lot of national attention, and most of it has not been pleasant. You had a meeting with him, I understand.
I did, and of course I've known Sheriff Steve Prater for a long time and have a lot of respect for his service as a law enforcement officer for several decades. It was unfortunate what he said, because some of it relating to the criminal justice reinvestment legislative initiatives that we passed this year, 10 bills altogether and signed into law. Some of it was just factually inaccurate, and I think he just didn't have the best information at hand. And then I think he said something about the impact would be to release some of the good prisoners who are trustees, and of course those are exactly the ones that we would want to release a little early, because they've proven themselves trustworthy and they have a good work ethic, and they didn't commit a serious violent offense. And so those are the ones that all states are targeting for criminal justice reform measures. And I think it's a real-world concern, but it's not one that should control the policy debate. And I don't think the sheriff meant it quite the way it came out, based on the meeting I had with him this morning in central Louisiana when I was up there. So hopefully all that's behind us now, and I'm excited about the opportunity we have to reduce our incarceration rate, reduce our recidivism rate, reduce the amount of money we're spending on corrections, and improve public safety. That has been the impact of criminal justice reform across the South in states that we modeled our legislation after. And so I'm optimistic that we're going to get that done, and there'll be some hiccups along the way, I'm sure, but overall I'm very pleased with the direction we're heading.
How significant is the funding that sheriff's offices get for housing inmates?
Well, I mean, it's extremely significant, and what they get from their parishes to house pretrial detainees is just a few dollars a day. I mean, it's something like $4 a day or $3.50 a day is what's statutorily required, and that's what most parishes pay. And then when they house a state inmate, we give them a higher per diem to do that, and it's $23.49, or it's something in that neighborhood. Obviously, if we want them to take their pretrial detainees and their state prisoners and offer services around education, maybe they need their HISET, which used to be called the GED, or some other vocational training, or they need treatment for addiction disorder or mental health, they have to have sufficient revenue with which to deliver those services. So that's something that we've been looking at hard, trying to figure out how we can do this, which is one of the reasons we want to do this criminal justice reinvestment. We anticipate that we'll save about over 10 years, we're going to reinvest about $184 million into criminal justice, and that's of the $262 million in savings. So 70% of what we save will be reinvested. That's why we have the name, the Criminal Justice Reinvestment. And it will be reinvested in areas like education training, addiction disorder, mental health, making sure that we have better reentry, and also making sure we have better supervision when they do go back into the community.
Your number again is 877-217-5757. We will go to the phone lines in just a moment with Governor John Bel Edwards. Another story, amid all the cuts to higher education, LSU is a part of a Nobel Prize in Physics. This is a major scientific discovery right in our backyard, certainly in your backyard of Livingston Parish, and it is something that the world is paying tribute to.
It is extremely exciting. Now, I would not want to get into a discussion about the specifics about what was done out there, because it's a high level of physics, but to have Nobel Peace Prize winners in physics associated with LSU and working out of Louisiana, I mean, that is exciting for all of us. And it also demonstrates the importance of investing in higher education. I do want to take one issue with your lead in there. For the first time in a decade, we did not
We-
cut higher education this year. We funded it without a cut relative to the previous year, and fully funded the TOPS program. That's the
There you
first
go.
time in a decade. So, so we are turning the corner on that. It's incredibly important for our future. But I'm excited. I was able to call Dr. Weiss at MIT and have a good discussion with him about it, and he was excited as a kid going downstairs to open a Christmas present or something. I mean, he was just giddy, and I'm so pleased with what they've done and what LSU and really all of higher education means to the state of Louisiana.
877-217-5757. We begin with James in Longview, Texas. James?
Well, good afternoon, Jim, and good afternoon, Governor Edwards.
Hey, James.
Anyhow, basically, I read in the news about a story, I guess it's pretty current, hitting today, about a Louisiana parish adopting an ordinance prohibiting flag desecration. And bear in mind, I'm very patriotic to the hilt and respect the flag, and as did all my ancestors, but I actually think it's pretty likely the ACLU and others will try to strike it down, and I'm just wondering, what is your prediction and feelings on the subject?
Well, my feeling on the subjects are that just like the national anthem, I think people ought to stand for that. I don't believe people ought to destroy the flag by burning or otherwise, unless that's the proper disposal method. You know that when a flag is no longer serviceable, there is a proper way to dispose of it, and it does involve burning. But that's obviously not what they're dealing with here. You know, I remember studying constitutional law in law school, and the Supreme Court had ruled that there is a constitutional right under the First Amendment to burn the flag as a part of expression. So the lawyer side of me understands that that's what the current law is, as announced by the Supreme Court in a decision. But it was Iberville Parish who, I think, passed an ordinance. And, you know, just the way these things normally happen, I would expect that the ordinance is going to be challenged. And, you know, I would think that the courts will apply the precedent that's been set by the Supreme Court. You know, we'll just have to see. But having served in the military, you know, I value the flag. I believe in patriotism. I think there are better ways to express oneself and call attention to concerns than burning the flag.
5-7. Nicholas in Baton Rouge. Nicholas, you're on with Governor Edwards. Hi, Nicholas.
Yeah, hi, Jim. Hi. Yeah, thank you for taking my call, and thank you, Governor, as well.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Hi. Yeah. So I just I wanted to ask you. You know, we all when it comes to criminal justice reform, the package that was passed through the legislature, we often hear that it's aimed at, you know, reducing incarceration rates and sort of
Okay, you're breaking up on us. Let's try it again. So let's see if we can get you to a better place now. Go ahead, Nicholas.
Can you hear me?
A little better.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think we often hear that the criminal justice reform package is aimed at reducing incarceration rates, sort of
Okay, you're breaking up.
earlier releases for.
Okay, well, Nicholas, I think you're talking about the aim is to reduce incarceration. There are those who say that we don't want to allow bad people out on the streets. Is there a real concern about that?
Well, I mean, there's always a concern, but we have to understand that 95% of the people in jail and prison today are going to be released. And so we got to make sure that we're doing a better job of preparing them for successful reentry, because it is going to happen. You know, the bill that increased the good time for nonviolent offenders, you know, nonviolent non-sex offenders, it made them eligible for release when they served 35% of their sentence, as opposed to the previous law, which was 40%. And on average, it's going to make a difference of a few weeks, maybe I think 2 months is what it is. But it's not just about reducing the incarceration rate. It's also about reducing recidivism, improving public safety, and reinvesting our money to make sure that we're going to be successful, the money that we're going to save. And the one thing that I'd like to emphasize, it's all modeled off of other Southern conservative states who are years ahead of us in these reform efforts. And so we see the impact that they've had elsewhere. And so we basically took best practices. Now, we put 10 bills together. They passed with a large bipartisan majority. And in fact, the task force that studied this, it was the most comprehensive review of criminal justice ever in the state of Louisiana. there were judges, DAs, sheriffs, business people. There were religious individuals on there on the task force, legislators, but all of these various groups came together to support the effort. And we will obviously move forward. I think we're in a much better position. We're going in a better direction. And we will make tweaks as we go forward as we see the need to do so. But right now, I'm very optimistic that we're moving in a much better direction when it comes to criminal justice in Louisiana.
Desiree in Baton Rouge. Hi, Desiree. You're on the air with Governor John Bel Edwards.
Yes, sir. Hi. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you,
I was
Desiree.
just wondering, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Yes, sir. I was just wondering, my home flooded last year, and I've been trying to work with the Restore program. I recently found out that I wasn't going to receive anything because of the SBA loan, the duplication of benefits that I qualified for. How hopeful are you, or how likely do you think that it might be that any of that legislation may change where we might experience some relief from that? Those of us who did qualify for the SBA loan.
Desiree, first of all, thank you for the question, and I know that that's a very difficult situation to be in. First of all, the program that we administer is Community Development Block Grant funded, which comes from HUD. The HUD policy that they have implemented says that if you qualify for a Small Business Administration loan, then it is a duplication of benefits in order if the state were to give you CDBG money, and that is the problem. And that's their interpretation of the Stafford Act, which is a federal act, and so that is one of those many strings that are attached to the CDBG funding that we get in Louisiana to administer this program with. I have written a number of letters. I believe to the Obama administration, but I know for sure also to the Trump administration, to leaders in Congress, our congressional delegation. I've had this conversation directly with the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Dr. Carson, and his chief of staff in New Orleans over breakfast, highlighting just how unfair it is to individuals such as yourself. And the worst part of it is it counts as a duplication of benefits even if you don't take the loan. If you're simply approved for a loan, the amount of the approval becomes a duplication of benefits that precludes the awarding of CDBG money, which is a real problem. Now, I wish I could tell you I'm more optimistic than I am, but we're going to keep fighting to try to see whether we can gain the flexibility. Hopefully, our congressional delegation will be able to insert some language into an appropriations measure, perhaps an appropriation of disaster relief funding for Florida or Texas or Puerto Rico that would go back and pick up the disasters in Louisiana in 2016 and free us of that bureaucratic hurdle and allow us to move forward and award funding for people in your situation, which, by the way, that is the overwhelming majority of concerns and criticisms that we get is people who are ineligible because of the SBA loan, and that is simply a federal rule.
Joey in Algiers. Hi, Joey. You're on Ask the Governor with Governor John Bel Edwards.
Hi there. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you, Governor, for taking my call. I was originally going to call about the criminal justice system, which, along with many others, I consider to be medieval. That is the incarceration rate here. But others have touched on that today, so I'll move to another topic, and that is minimum wage. Last time I looked, I think the poverty rate for the state of Louisiana is 27%, and here in New Orleans, amongst minority groups, it's over 35%. I think a lot of that is due to the very low minimum wage. I know in this a conservative environment that you have to work in, it's probably not going to happen, but we'd sure like to see a increase in the minimum wage. So many folks here in the city of New Orleans are service workers, and I understand that the industry could certainly support something like that. What are your thoughts on that?
Joey, my thoughts are in line with yours. $7.25 is not a meaningful minimum wage. It's been locked at that level since 2009. We can't wait on Congress to address this because they don't seem capable of addressing anything. I believe in Louisiana we ought to take it upon ourselves, as most other states now have done that have a higher minimum wage in the states than is prescribed by the federal government. I have advocated for a transition to $8.50 as a minimum wage over a couple of years. That's the same minimum wage they have in neighboring Arkansas, and I think it would be it would be relatively modest but meaningful, and we know that a single individual, I'm not talking about an individual with children, in order to support him or herself in Louisiana, given all the costs of living, whether it's transportation, housing, food, you name it, it's better than $8 an hour just for an individual who works 40 hours a week. And that is the bare minimum necessities. That's not any sort of extravagant lifestyle. And I think that we ought to move in that direction. I've supported legislation each of the last 2 years in the legislature to do that. We're going to continue moving those bills forward. And by the way, the vast majority of people in Louisiana agree that we should raise the minimum wage. And so this is only a problem in Baton Rouge, in the state capital. It's not a problem across the state.
Claire in Baton Rouge. Hi, Claire. You're on the air with Governor Edwards.
Hi, Governor Edwards. Thanks for
Claire.
taking my call. I had read the letter that Senator Kennedy wrote to you last week, sort of attacking the Medicaid expansion program and saying that it was harming the state budget. And given that most of the funding doesn't come from the state itself and that we've managed to insure so many people under the expansion, it seems to me that not only is this criticism actually inaccurate, but it's largely political. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, since Medicaid expansion has been such a big accomplishment of yours as governor.
Well, Claire, first of all, I thank you for the question. And look, Senator Kennedy's just wrong. Not only is Medicaid expansion not harming our budget and impacting our ability to fund other programs, we're actually saving $300 million state general fund this year because of Medicaid expansion. The match rate we will pay for expansion never exceeds 10 cents on the dollar, and we, through provider fees and premium tax increases, fully covered the cost of up to the full 10%. So it's not coming out of money that would otherwise have been in the general fund available to pay for all the other things. Secondly, I will tell you that Medicaid expansion has done an awful lot of good for our state. Our uninsured rate went from about 24% to 9%. Employment in the healthcare sector has never been stronger than it is right now. And I don't know which of the 250 people receiving breast cancer treatment he would not want to have receive that treatment. Those are Medicaid beneficiaries under expansion who, because of expansion, now know they have breast cancer and they're getting treatment. Or the 211 with colon cancer, or the nearly 5,000 who've had precancerous polyps removed. Which of those individuals shouldn't have had that available to them? So I understand that he doesn't like expansion. He's voted 2 or 3 times to take insurance away from those individuals in Louisiana who have it because of Medicaid expansion. But it has been a great thing for our state, and it has also made sure that our providers, especially hospitals and in particular rural hospitals, have actually benefited, because they're in a much better position to continue to provide care. And we're now in a much better position to improve health outcomes in Louisiana, which is the goal. I mean, that's the reason you expand Medicaid. It isn't just to cover more people, it's to improve health. I believe we are well on the road to doing that. So I appreciate your question.
Carol in New Orleans. Hi, Carol. You're on the air with Governor John Bel Edwards.
Hi, sir. I had a horrible experience, along with maybe 500 other Louisianians, at the DMV. Is there anything you can do to help staff that place?
All right. The Department of Motor Vehicles, what's going on?
Well, and it's Carol?
Yes.
Oh, Carol, thank you very much for the call. I will find out. And if I understood the question correctly, it was a staffing issue, and you're asking if we can do more to staff the Department of Motor Vehicles. I can tell you, I will get with. First of all, before you hang up, stay on the line, because we'll get your number, and I will have someone call back to you from OMV to answer more specifically. But we will take a look at it. I know that a number of years ago, the decision was made to opened a lot of private tag agent locations. That's not the exact word for it. I can't remember what we call them. But for convenience sake, rather than, and to try to save money, rather than expanding the staffing at our offices of motor vehicle, we have these private operators who are out there doing much of that work in terms of issuing driver's license and registrations and that sort of thing. But I will get with Karen St. Germain, who runs the Office of Motor Vehicles, and we will get back with you if you'll just give your name and number to Tucker.
Let's go to Ryan in Alexandria. Ryan, you're on the air with Governor Edwards. Hi, Ryan.
Yes, sir. How you doing?
Fine.
I guess my question is, I understand the governor's position on the criminal reform as far as education, rehabilitation, trying to release them back into the public, get them into jobs. But I guess my thing is, as a law enforcement officer, and granted I only see a small snippet of it where I'm at, but I have to go to these probation and parole revocations, and you've got people that walk up, stand in front of the stand, they haven't fulfilled their obligations for the parole or probation, say for the last 1, 2, 3 years, and the judge says, "Oh, well, you know what? We'll just go ahead and give you another year to do whatever it is that you have to do." And I guess my issue is, how do you expect people to act a certain way when you don't hold them responsible? I'm all about education. I'm all about helping, so that these people can maybe change their criminal ways. But if you're not holding them responsible, you can't really expect them to act any other way than they've been acting.
Ryan, thank you for the call, and thank you also for your service as a law enforcement officer. And if I understood you, you're in the Alexandria area in Rapides Parish. I don't believe there's anything in the criminal justice reinvestment package in those 10 bills that is directly on point with the problem that you just mentioned. To the extent that that's a real problem, that's a problem in the judicial system and how certain judges approach that particular issue. The issue that we've been dealing with here lately has to do with the computation of good time, which was at 40% of the straight time sentence for certain offenders, all of whom are offenders who were convicted of nonviolent, non-sex crimes, and we moved that number to 35%. To 35%, which impacts them by just a couple of months on average. Some of them not even that much. Some of them just a day or two in terms of when they're going to get out. But the effort is to make sure that we are doing a better job of successfully preparing these individuals for reentry into society. 95% of the people who are in the state's custody are going to get out. What we haven't done a very good job is making sure that they get out and stay out. And so we're going to do a better job: education, training, addiction disorder, mental health, supervision in the community, so that they can get out. We'll reduce our incarceration rate, reduce the recidivism rate, and ultimately enhance public safety through reduced crime rates. That has been the impact of these efforts in all the southern conservative states who started doing this several years ago.
Susanna in Baton Rouge. Hi, Susanna. You're on Ask the Governor with Governor John Bel Edwards.
Hi, Governor. I listened to your radio show last month, and a woman asked about managed long-term care for the elderly, and I didn't really understand what your answer meant. Are the 30,000 Louisianans waiting to receive care in their homes a priority of yours? And if so, what is the plan to help these people?
Well, Susanna, thank you very much for the call. First of all, everyone in Louisiana who needs care of any kind is a priority of mine. One of the issues around long-term managed care is that a minority of states have actually done it. There is absolutely a cost increase to transition to long-term managed care, which has been one of the reasons we have not moved in that direction. But secondly, I am concerned about taking an insurance company and placing that insurance company between the state and the provider, and thinking that after the insurance company takes its overhead and its profit, that enough money will actually be going to the individuals who need the care. And so we have a lot of things that we have to work through I'm not just going to move to long-term managed care unless and until we have worked through all of those concerns. And I've talked to some governors of states who have gone to long-term managed care and have tried to move away from it because it has not produced the savings or the improved care that they were looking for.
Thank you, Susanna. 877-217-5757. Brian in New Orleans. Brian, you're on the air with Governor Edwards.
Hello, Governor. Good afternoon. Thank you for taking my call. I wanted to call and talk to you because this year, my partner of 12 years passed away from a quarter of a counterfeit pill. The coroner, we had to ask the coroner to test for fentanyl because they just test for opioids, and we did some research and had them test for fentanyl, and we found out that it was fentanyl. And so just one quarter of one pill killed Joshua Rispin. And I want to know what the state is doing about how to decrease deaths from not necessarily just opioids, but fentanyl specifically.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry to hear about your loss and all of the losses that we've had in Louisiana. Sadly, in Louisiana, we've actually had more than 100 prescriptions for opioids in a year given out by doctors to every 100 people in our state. I think it was 122. We know that 66% of current heroin users started with prescription opioids for pain. We have taken action just in the most recent legislative session to limit the amount of opioids that can be prescribed for acute pain. And if a doctor wants to go beyond that rather small limit, they have to put in the file exactly why they're doing that. That doesn't apply to chronic pain for people who are being treated for cancer or in hospice, but for acute pain. So we're trying to prevent the addiction on the front end. But we've also made sure that we've beefed up the prescription monitoring program with pharmacists so that they have to check and make sure that individuals are not getting multiple prescriptions filled and getting more of that than they should. But fentanyl is a big problem, and it's one of the reasons why there have so many overdoses is because just a tiny amount of that can be lethal. And I will tell you that if you look at the pharmaceutical industry as a whole, those that have manufactured the opioid painkillers, they have done a terrible disservice to the people of our country by promoting their products so much that they've been overprescribed. And if you look at the relationship between those companies and the doctors, between their companies and their lobbyists, you see an awful lot of bad misconduct there, and we are also taking action on that front as well.
Since we last talked, we had this terrible tragedy in Las Vegas. What do you make of the carnage that was involved in the deaths of 58 people?
You know, totally unspeakable. And as best I know as we sit here today, I don't think they've been able to pinpoint a motive yet. And it doesn't appear that the individual was aided by anybody. So this was a sinister act of the worst kind by one individual. We don't even know what his motivation was, but you know, to be able to do that to people who were engaged in a country music concert, having a good time, and the stories that came forth from those families of those victims about how many of them were there celebrating a birthday or an anniversary, or you know, it's just an awesome, an awful event for the people of this country, but obviously for those families who lost loved ones. And you know, I don't know that we'll ever understand just the evil that eats away at people. I'm often reminded of what Montrell Jackson said in Baton Rouge and on Facebook last year, and this was before he was killed by an evil monster as well. And don't let hate infect your heart, because I can only attribute it to hate, and it's just an awful thing.
Are there any laws that can address this, or is this the price of living in a free society?
Well, I don't know that you're ever going to pass a law that's going to prevent these types of events, but you can certainly make them harder, and sometimes it may not even require a law. I understand that the Congress is looking at these bump stocks and seeing whether legislation is in order to make sure that the bump stocks are not sold to individuals such as the perpetrator of this crime Other people believe that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms could do this through regulation without legislation. I don't know what the correct answer is, but I know that they need to be examined so that people can't basically turn what is a semi-automatic rifle into an automatic rifle. And I know that that's an oversimplification, but that is the effect of the bump stock.
And you have been in the military and have handled weapons. You know the difference.
Well, certainly I do, and you know, of course we were trained how to use them, and we always had safety in mind, and of course no evil purpose behind what we were doing. But the training that I had with automatic weapons, whether it was the M16 or the 50 cal, you name it, those weapons, if they are automatic, they have the potential to just do tremendous damage in a very short period of time.
You went hunting recently.
I did.
What kind of a weapon did you use?
I used a 300 Weatherby Magnum and shot an elk. I was in northwest Colorado opening day of rifle season this past Saturday. And on the morning hunt, I was able to kill a 6x6, and very proud of that. I'm looking forward to getting the meat back so I can enjoy some good elk.
There you go. Judy in Lafayette. Good afternoon, Judy.
Good afternoon. And Governor Edwards, I want to first thank you for doing the terrific job that you have done so far. To be honest with you, I'm a registered Republican who wishes she could say she voted for you. But
I'll give you that opportunity in 2019, Judy.
Okay. The only thing I think that I would oppose and I would love to hear some details about is I just recently retired from a charter school. I taught there, and it was and is still a fabulous charter school. And I know about the lawsuit that has, been in the news and so forth. But I am wondering, what does the state intend to do about the 700,000 charter school students who are going to be displaced if they decide to pull the minimum funding program to make it unavailable to the charter schools?
Yeah, well, first of all, Judy, thank you for being an educator. I often tell people that educators are true heroes, everyday heroes, and that people should be thankful for, because I know for myself, whatever success I've had is due in large part to my teachers. With respect to the charter school situation, there is a litigation in place. We're waiting on the state Supreme Court to issue a ruling on whether the MFP dollars can be directed to non-legacy type 2 charter schools. And we don't have an answer to that. And if they decide that part or all of it cannot be used, I have to believe that there will be some period of time where they will give the state, myself and the legislature, an opportunity to address this. You know, it's not an issue for the legacy type 2 charter schools because they're funded in full by state dollars. And at the end of the day, just kind of reading the tea leaves, I think that the ultimate question is going to be whether local dollars for the per pupil allocation in the MFP can be directed away from the local school district and to a charter school that is not affiliated with that district at all. I don't know what the Supreme Court's going to do, but if ultimately they say no, then clearly if those charter schools are going to stay in operation, the state is going to have to find an alternative way to fund them. It's going to be very expensive, as you pointed out. I think you overestimated the number of kids in charter schools, but it is a substantial number, but most of the charter schools in New Orleans are, and that's where the biggest concentration are in the state. They are going back to the Orleans Parish School Board, so they will not be impacted by this decision. But there will be a number of charter schools elsewhere in the state that would be if it goes in the direction that you suggest that it might.
Thank you, Judy. Frank in Slidell. Frank, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Mr. Governor.
Thank you,
I'm
Frank.
a current state. I'm sorry. Thank you. At any rate, I'm a current state employee, and I would like to thank you for having the courage to stand up for us after the 8 years of budgetary slashes by the former governor. And my family thanks you, and it's about time. So I'll wait for your comments. Thank you.
Well, Frank, thank you for calling, but more importantly, thank you for your service to the state. You know, we were able this past legislative session to give a 2% across-the-board pay raise to state workers. That pay raise will go into effect in January. That's the first across-the-board pay raise since 2007. And it was the right thing to do for a lot of reasons, but most especially since it's been so long since we had given those types of pay raise. But secondly, it's a move to a new pay system, which is actually going to cost the state less money going forward and make sure that the lowest paid employees are eligible for the 4% increase going forward rather than every state employee. And then it changes by quartile after that. So it's a better, cheaper pay system. You know, we had $125 million in turnover costs associated with state employees. So the investment that we're making along the lines of this pay increase is a small fraction of that amount that should stabilize, work towards stabilizing state employees and making sure we don't have this recurring problem that exceeds $100 million just on turnover costs related to state employees.
Matt in New Orleans. Hello, Matt. You're on with Governor John Bel Edwards.
Hello, thank you. And Governor, I'm a veteran as well. I served in the Louisiana National Guard. So I appreciate your leadership on behalf of veterans and all the great changes that you've been making at the Department of Veterans Affairs. One of those things that I saw that I was just reading about is this new veteran entrepreneurship program, which, you know, I saw that it's kind of a partnership across state agencies, and I think that's exactly the sort of thing that we ought to be doing. My question has to do with, you know, I feel like a lot of veteran programs tend to be things that, you know, make us feel good, make veterans feel good, but maybe don't do a whole lot to change veterans' lives and to improve their lives. So I'm wondering what sort of data, what sort of processes do you all have in place to measure the impact of your programs and to measure kind of the effectiveness of programs for veterans?
Well, thank you, Matt. I appreciate your call and your service to the National Guard. By the way, this morning I went up to Marksville because the 1020th Engineering Company, 156 soldiers, they're going to go to Fort Bliss later today in West Texas and train for a few weeks, and then they're headed to Kuwait for a deployment that'll last 9 months. And Captain Gleason and First Sergeant Hoover are going to lead those soldiers over to Kuwait, and they're going to do vertical construction throughout the Middle East, but in some very troublesome spots. And so I hope everybody will join their prayers to mine that they will go and perform their mission and return home safely and pray for their families while they're gone. The Louisiana Veteran Entrepreneurship Program is the one you were first discussing. That started this week. That's a brand new program where 19 veterans are receiving education and training. It's a partnership between Economic Development, the State Department of Veterans Affairs, the National Guard, the Louisiana Business and Technology Center, as well as LSU Executive Education. And they are working together. They've got 19 veterans now that are learning how to run their own businesses, and we're going to try to train 108 over the first year. And we have certain goals. We want, for example, 30% of all of those participants to successfully start their own business. We want to make sure that they can raise at least $5 million in capital necessary to be successful, and that all of their businesses together create at least 100 new jobs. So that's an example of how we have very specific metrics that we're looking for to gauge the success of the program. But this is the first time this program's ever been done in Louisiana. I'm excited about the potential that it holds to improve the lives of veterans, especially those who struggle to make a transition after they leave the service. But I can tell you, Joey Strickland at the Department of Veterans Affairs every single day is working as hard as he can to make sure that we're doing what we can as a state to best serve the veterans and, by the way, their families.
This will be our final caller for today's show with Governor Edwards, show number 19, Clifford in Breaux Bridge. Clifford, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Governor, thanks for your service as a vet and your continuing service as a public service. My question is, where is the state of Louisiana at at the what process are we at with allowing doctors to provide marijuana medically?
Medicinal marijuana?
Yeah, medicinal marijuana. It was passed by the legislature. Actually, there was a bill that was passed before I became governor, and it became law. And I really don't remember whether Governor Jindal signed it or he didn't sign it, but it became law. But it became necessary to pass another bill. And in Breaux Bridge, in fact, it's probably your senator, Fred Mills, sponsored the bill, and it passed, and I signed it into law. And we're in the process now of going through all of the requirements of the bill, allowing, for example, the Southern University and LSU ag centers the right of first refusal to actually grow the marijuana. We then have, and to contract out to have the oil extracted and so forth. We also have to work through the Board of Medical Examiners so that they can issue the regulations around the prescribing of the marijuana, and the Pharmacy Board to pick the 10 pharmacists or pharmacies, I should say, around the state of Louisiana who will be licensed to sell the product. I wish I could tell you with more certainty how many months it's going to be before it's available. I don't have that information right now, Clifford, but if you're still listening, if you're still on the line, talk to Tucker. We'll get your name and number. We'll get you a better answer on that. And I will research that and try to come back next month, maybe with an update on when we think it's going to be available. I do support medicinal use of marijuana when prescribed by a physician, because we have too many parents, especially of young children with seizure disorders and other disorders, who are choosing to either leave their kid in a state without help, where the doctors say that the marijuana would help, or leave Louisiana. And nobody should have to leave Louisiana to make sure that their children can get what their doctor thinks would be a benefit to them.
We've just got about 25 seconds, Governor, but I know a few weeks ago you took the loss to Troy State by LSU pretty hard.
I did, but my life has been much better since then with wins at Florida and Auburn. And you know, I'm almost embarrassed to tell you, I'm 51 years old, and I went home after the Troy State game and just about could not fall asleep. It just had that big of an impact on me. I'm a huge LSU Tiger fan.